And I've got it all right here.
Bobby Heenan's final 48 hours were a horrific end for one of wrestling's sharpest minds. And before this story ends, it reaches into the DiBiase family welfare scandal and the March 20th, 2026 acquittal of Ted DiBiase Jr., a verdict that closed a courtroom but could not close the wound underneath. These are two different stories on the surface. They are not. They come from the same machine, and that machine has been breaking people for a very long time. Picture a man who never took a bump in his later years, never threw a punch, and still wound up silenced by the industry he gave everything to. That was Bobby Heenan, not broken by a chair shot or a fall from the top rope. Broken by the invisible cost that wrestling rarely puts on camera. The cost of being great inside a system never built to protect great people once the spotlight moved on. Raymond Louis Heenan was born in Chicago on November 1st, 1944. He dropped out of school in the 8th grade to support his mother and grandmother. As a teenager, he was carrying bags and selling refreshments at wrestling shows. He started performing as Pretty Boy Bobby Heenan, and almost immediately the business introduced him to pain. Early in his career, he suffered a broken neck. That injury pushed him toward becoming a manager, a cowardly and fast-talking villain who let other men do the physical work. Even before anyone knew him as the Brain, his body had already started paying the price. What came from that injury was something rare. Heenan built the Heenan family, managing villains across the AWA and the WWF. He stood ringside for some of the biggest moments in wrestling history, managing King Kong Bundy and Andre the Giant in the main events of WrestleMania 2 and WrestleMania 3. His timing, his delivery, his ability to say exactly the wrong thing in exactly the right way made him unforgettable. He became a commentator alongside Gorilla Monsoon and Mean Gene Okerlund, and he holds a distinction no one else can claim. He is the only person to sit at the announcer's table for both Monday Night Raw and WCW Monday Nitro. His voice was his weapon, his livelihood, and the thing that made him immortal. Then the business took it. In 2002, Heenan was diagnosed with throat and laryngeal cancer. He reached remission by 2004, and that same year, WWE inducted him into the Hall of Fame. People celebrated him and gave him a microphone one more time. But the treatment that saved his life had already done damage that would never heal. In 2007, he underwent major reconstructive jaw surgery. His lower jaw was removed. The man who made a living off every syllable he uttered now communicated through whiteboards and written notes at fan appearances. He also suffered falls in his later years, fracturing his shoulder and hip. The system that made him one of its biggest stars had no structure to carry him through what came after. If you remember Bobby more for the jokes that made you laugh out loud, or for the quiet courage he showed near the end when he kept showing up for fans who loved him, drop a comment and tell me which side of him stayed with you. And subscribe, because stories like this are the ones wrestling history tends to leave out. By mid-September 2017, Heenan's body was shutting down. Long-term complications from his throat cancer had begun failing his systems. He spent his final 48 hours at home in Largo, Florida, under palliative and family care. His organs began to fail. He was surrounded by his wife of nearly 40 years, Cynthia, and his daughter, Jessica. On September 17, 2017, Bobby Heenan passed away. The official cause was organ failure from complications of laryngeal cancer. Bret Hart, Vince McMahon, and Ric Flair paid tribute. The industry called him one of the greatest managers and commentators who ever lived. But respect after death does not erase what the business had already taken from him. This is where the story widens. Kayfabe was wrestling's old unwritten law. The act had to feel real. In the 20th century, promoters protected the illusion so aggressively that performers often had to live their characters in public. It cost people physically, mentally, socially, and ethically. Bobby Heenan is the biological cost. The DiBiase family is the social and ethical one. In 1987, the WWF created the $1 Million Man character for Ted DiBiase Sr., a rich and arrogant man who believed every person had a price. To make the public believe it, the promotion funded the illusion in real life. They flew him first class, booked him in 5-star hotels, and gave him cash to flash in public, buying meals and throwing money at fans. This erased the line between Ted the man and Ted the character. Living that life on the road fed a distorted ego, substance abuse, and infidelity. It nearly destroyed his marriage to Melanie and created an unstable home for his sons Ted Jr. and Brett. In the early 1990s, Ted Sr. experienced a spiritual crisis. He stepped away from wrestling, became an ordained minister, and created Heart of David Ministries to share his story of redemption. But moving from large WWF paychecks to donations and grants created financial pressure the family was not prepared for. That pressure made them open to money sources they might have otherwise avoided. The Mississippi Department of Human Services was led by John Davis from 2016 to 2019. Over $77 million in federal public assistance funds were misdirected from programs meant to help the state's poorest residents. Davis was drawn to the DiBiase family's wrestling fame. Prosecutors described it as a lonely heart scheme, where he traded public money for friendship and access. He promised Brett and Ted Jr. generational security and generational wealth. The three men called themselves DiBiase and planned a property by that name. Brett DiBiase was hired by the department despite lacking qualifications. Money moved through nonprofits controlled by Davis Associates. Davis approved $160,000 in TANF funds for Brett's 4-month stay at a luxury addiction treatment facility in Malibu. Brett also received a $250,000 salary for a job he was unqualified to perform, $48,000 to teach agency employees to identify workplace drug use, and over $9,000 for luxury hotel stays and first-class travel. On December 17, 2020, Brett pleaded guilty to state fraud charges. On March 2, 2023, he pleaded guilty federally to conspiracy to defraud the United States, agreeing to cooperate with prosecutors while awaiting sentencing. A state audit found that Heart of David Ministries had received about $1.7 million in improper TANF transfers. The state auditor's office demanded the money back. The ministry closed permanently. The redemption platform Ted Sr. built over decades collapsed under the same financial weight that had once kept his wrestling character feeling real. Ted DiBiase Jr., a former WWE performer, faced a 13-count federal indictment at the Thad Cochran U.S. Federal Courthouse in Jackson, Mississippi. Charges included conspiracy, wire fraud, theft of federal program funds, and money laundering. Prosecutors called him a wolf in sheep's clothing, saying he used shell companies to receive over $3 million in contracts funded by welfare money intended for leadership programs, inner-city youth initiatives, and emergency food assessments. Christy Webb testified that Davis told her to fund Teddy, and that Ted Jr. delivered one list and little else, while cash advances allegedly funded a vehicle, a boat, and a down payment on a $1.5 million lakeside home. His defense attorney Scott Gilbert argued John Davis was the true center of the fraud, a controlling administrator whose management style made Ted Jr.'s unusual work arrangement look criminal when it was not. The defense pointed to a mobile fitness app called Get Fit that Ted Jr. worked on in 2017 with Kevin McClendon. The app was designed to fight poverty in Mississippi using health and nutrition content from figures like Archie Manning, Jerry Rice, and Chef Kat Cora. It was never finished. The defense said that showed failed oversight, not criminal intent. On March 20th, 2026, after 2 months of trial and 4 hours of deliberation, Ted Jr. was acquitted on all 13 federal counts. He said 7 years of scrutiny had nearly torn his family apart. The civil fight continued. The Mississippi Department of Human Services still pursued Ted Sr., Ted Jr., and Brett to recover more than $20 million. Bobby Heenan and the DiBiase family look like separate tragedies. They are not. One man lost the voice that made him immortal. Another family lived a money character so completely that money became the center of the damage left behind. Wrestling has historically operated without the labor protections, pensions, and healthcare structures common in other major entertainment fields. What happens when the show finally ends is rarely part of the plan. Bobby Heenan's final 48 hours were not just sad because he died. They were sad because the brightest voice in wrestling ended in silence. He gave the world genuine joy, wit, and memories that outlived the pain, and nothing erases that. But the question this story leaves open is one wrestling has never fully answered. Do you think the industry protects its legends enough once the spotlight fades? Comment below. Subscribe for more stories that look past what happens inside the ring, because the true cost of the illusion does not end when the cameras turn off. For Bobby Heenan, it never did. It never